Last year, I presented at the UK Hypnosis Convention in London. I'll be doing the same again in November this year. My talk last year was The Art of Trance-Formative Tales, and I've created this version for you here. We use metaphors far more than we realise, from stating that we can't grasp an idea or would like to gain perspective, or that we feel stuck in a rut. During this presentation, I'll share how I observe for clients metaphors, where I find additional metaphors, and how I integrate hypnosis with the metaphors to develop therapeutic stories to help clients create change from the inside out. In 1794, a young boy named Jacob had an operation to remove a tumour. During the operation, Jacob was told a story which absorbed his attention so much that he had no conscious awareness of any pain. This experience lasted with him, and he went on to write many stories, including Snow White. Storytelling is about connection, although perhaps paradoxically, it often achieves this through disconnection, through the use of the observing self, often described as the part of you which is a neutral observer of ongoing experience that allows people to observe or be absorbed in alternative ideas or realities without giving judgment and rejecting the perspective. This is also why it can be so helpful in therapy. Imagine a blanket of stars sweeping across a savanna, or a fire crackling to life, shadows dancing, the gentle orange glow of the fire flickering hypnotically, occasionally undulating with the breeze. Everyone gathering around the fire for warmth and safety. Then, to the backdrop of cicadas and the popping of the fire, an elder begins to speak softly with a tone that commands attention. They start to tell stories about the tribe's ancestors, tales of discovery, tales of conflict. And as the night continues, they tell stories of ancient myths and legends. And when the fire starts to calm down to embers, the occasional log being thrown on just to temporarily stimulate that fire, stories begin to be told by others, stories of current interactions, events, or discoveries. In another location, perhaps at another time, a tribe might be in a cave, painting stories on the walls, telling stories of animals that they've hunted and how, of different nearby locations or key events which have happened. Maybe a healer within a tribe helps someone by sharing stories or setting what I would think of as metaphorical tasks, or encouraging the person to have a specific dream or carry out a certain ritual. Storytelling has been around as long as people have communicated, from oral traditions to written media, and then on to audio and visual storytelling in games. Stories have been used to connect people with ideas, with each other, or with certain learning or emotions. Stories can contain helpful patterns, mirroring problems and solutions. They can offer a shared language or a new perspective on a situation, and they can make learning more memorable. Storytelling is a fundamental part of being human. Once Upon a Time and other story openers are probably some of the earliest verbal hypnotic inductions. They quickly absorb attention and increase responsivity, and they can encourage us to put aside our critical thinking for a while as we buy in to the story. When a child is playing with a teddy bear, they're creating a connection with that bear and the story unfolding for the bear. They absorb themselves in a magical world that can allow them to safely play out and explore different ideas. Incidentally, my sister gave me this teddy bear. And I remember when I was a young child, I used to love spending time at my grandparents' when my magic uncle would visit. I used to call him my magic uncle because he was a magician. Whenever I knew that he was visiting, I'd want to perform a magic show for him. He was always enthusiastic and encouraging, and he'd give me advice to help me improve. The advice wasn't often about how to actually perform the mechanics of the trick, but rather how to package the trick. I'd perform by saying something like, pick a card, any card, now place it back in the deck. Now I'm going to find your card. I would then do a full shuffle, perhaps moving the card that the person has selected to the top of the deck, and I'd continue searching through the deck, and I'd find a card that I know is obviously the wrong card, but I've tried to make it look like I was searching really hard to find the right card. Then I'd proclaim, is this your card? And the person would obviously tell me that it wasn't, and would act as if I've got the trick wrong. And then I'd say, no, actually, this is your card. At which point, I'd click my fingers and the card would change to be the correct card. My magic uncle would ask me, well, what was the story? He tried to encourage me to create a story around the trick, rather than just performing the trick as I'd read it in a magic book. He explained that this is the difference between a trick and a performance, that tricks need fleshing out, not just focusing on the bare bones. He explained that if you create stories around tricks, you can use the same trick to create many different stories. And the performance becomes more memorable because the story is memorable. This is the same with fiction. There can be thousands of romance stories that are all largely the same kind of structure, but each story is packaged differently and can have subtle nuance that can give meaning to different areas of the story. This message has continued on through my life and into my therapy work. The patterns of problems and solutions are the bare bones, the stories are the flesh. While clients are describing what they would like help with and how they would like things to be, they're describing the patterns for the problem and solution, and often using metaphors without realizing, both verbally and non-verbally. This is why storytelling can be so effective in therapy. It allows you to take metaphors that clients have shared and apply these to the problem and solution that that client is presenting with, because you're mainly using metaphors the client has presented. These metaphors are better understood by them and they're more meaningful to that client. It's difficult sometimes to put things into words. Being autistic, I obviously know this all too well. We've all had that experience where you get frustrated because you can't fully explain yourself. So you resort to using metaphors, saying things like, it's like, and then you say something. If a client says that it's like they're stuck on a treadmill and that they just want to be able to slow things down, they're currently feeling overwhelmed. They know what they mean by this. You, as the therapist, may not know in detail what that client means. And maybe they struggle to explain the details, and that's obviously fine. You may decide to use the metaphor in a therapeutic story, and within the story, you offer up a solution for slowing down the treadmill. Or maybe you take the treadmill metaphor and you turn it into talking about someone trying to perhaps descend a steep slope, struggling to stop, barely keeping balance. And then they direct themselves diagonally across the slope to slow themselves down and take back control. The client can then take the pattern and non-consciously translate it into a solution to their problem. Just like if I told you a romance story and someone came along and took the pattern for my story, stripping away my characters, my setting, any other surface level details, and then using this foundation, rebuilding a new story with their own characters, setting, and other details. When telling stories, interesting things happen in the listener and between the listener and the storyteller. The listener's hardwired to non-consciously recognize the patterns within the story. We are essentially pattern matching creatures. We see elephants in the clouds and faces in our toast. Listening to stories, increases brain activity as more of the brain is used to process the story than if we just present facts to someone. Often, stories will include rich sensory, descriptive language and dialogue. They may evoke reminiscing or imagining a potential future and other processes. The storyteller may be using different voice tones, gestures, and other behaviors to help tell the story. All of which makes something more memorable because more of the brain is involved in listening to the story than just listening to someone teach a bunch of facts. Storytelling can also increase the release of oxytocin, which is a social bonding chemical, and dopamine, which is a behavioral activation and motivation chemical. A recent study from 2021 with hospitalized children found that those who had sessions with a storyteller had increased oxytocin and positive emotions and decreased cortisol and pain, and they spoke more positively about their time in the hospital compared to a control group. Storytelling focuses attention and stimulates neural coupling or mirroring between the storyteller and listener, which again helps to make it so valuable to use storytelling with clients in therapy. People often ask me how I create so many stories for my therapeutic Sleep Stories YouTube channel. When I started creating stories on my Dan Jones Sleep Stories channel, creating stories every single week and sometimes multiple times a week, I've had it really, really difficult. I had no problem creating stories in therapy sessions, but I struggled to create stories for YouTube. Now, I eventually solved this problem. I began to make my YouTube stories the same way that I do storytelling in therapy. I imagined that the viewers are a single client who wants to help to reduce stress, worry, and anxiety, and they want to have help to improve their sleep. I'd do live streams where viewers could suggest ideas. When I do this without live streams, I use a random list of words created with a storytelling tool that I've made. I take this random list of words, whether auto-generated or suggested by viewers, and I imagine that these words represent some of the random ideas which can come out in a therapy session. I look at the random list of words and I think about therapeutic metaphors that I can make from those words to address the patterns I want to address, and what story ideas I can create from the words to add flesh to the bones of the story. I go into a lot more detail about specifically crafting sleep stories and calming narratives in my book Dreamweaver's Guide, which to my knowledge is the first book on how to craft calming stories and meditation and sleep stories. So I take my process for identifying and developing metaphors that I use in therapy and apply it to creating sleep stories. In therapy, I don't get given a nice, neat list of words and phrases. I have to observe the client for this information, while also observing for the patterns of the problem and solution. I listen to what clients say, the metaphors they verbally use, whether this is them saying that they've been feeling on edge, or they don't want to rock the boat, or they feel stuck. Perhaps when talking about what they want, they talk about how they want things to be calm, or they wish things were more plain sailing. I watch for what clients do. Maybe they wring their hands together when talking about something, or they rock back on their chair, or dig their feet into the ground, or they cover or close their eyes. Or maybe they use specific gestures like marking things out, or weighing things up, or using a kind of churning gesture or a back and forth gesture. I listen to what they say while they're doing these behaviors. I ask questions to identify patterns that I'll be creating a story for, asking what, where, when, and how questions, both when asking about the problem, when it happens, when it doesn't happen, when it happens when they wouldn't expect it to, and when it doesn't happen when they would expect it to. And I ask about the solution and what they want things to be like. I generally don't write any of my observations down. I may write down what someone says they want help with and what they want to achieve, and I'll write down anything if I'm working for someone that that person or that organization wants me to have recorded from the session, and anything that's important from the session. However, I don't write down all of my observations because whenever I'm looking at a sheet of paper, I'm obviously missing something that's happening in front of me. It's also helpful to gather metaphors and stories that resonate with you from other sources. The longer you're in clinical practice, the more stories of how other clients resolve similar problems you'll have. You can also read fiction. You can read fairy tales, myths and legends, fables or parables from various cultures. And you can use these to help to flesh out the stories that you tell with clients. Now, I want to do a quick exercise with you. I'm going to read out a brief real client session extract where the client presented what they would like help with. And what I'd like you to do is just listen to what I say. You can obviously take notes if you want, and then pause this and take just 5 minutes or so to write down metaphors and ideas from what you've observed, and some ways that you could use those metaphors therapeutically within a story for this client. And you can share your ideas if you want to in the comments. So you don't have to come up with a whole story, just perhaps some ways that you can use the presented ideas. For example, if a client said they just feel like everything's a uphill struggle, maybe the therapeutic metaphor you could integrate into a story would be of someone climbing a mountain, perhaps struggling to the top, maybe stopping occasionally to rest when the going gets tough, then looking back over how far they've come when they reach the summit. So this is a section of that therapy transcript. Dan, so briefly, what would you like to achieve? Client, I'd like to be successful in running a business which involves various therapies, but I have a blockage because I feel guilty about earning money from helping people because I have a Buddhist background. So I have a real dilemma with this. And so I send myself in tangents. So it's a mixture of Eastern ethics and living in the West. And I find it difficult to reconcile the two. So I end up at an impasse where I can't go forward, and yet I've learned some amazing therapies and I've got some really good gifts that I can give to people. I send myself round in a circle of being stuck. I have a fear of letting go of a fixed situation. I've been in a comfortable situation for a while now, and now I'm getting out of it. The ground's not level. It's a fear-based thing. There's just something I need. I can't get to the seed of. I need to break it open and fly like a bird, but there's something blocking me. But I don't know. I can't get to the core of it. I can feel there are things I want to do, and yet I don't seize it. It's like I'm self-sabotaging myself. There's something at the seed of it, at the core of it. And I just wish I could get to it because I don't know what it is. It feels like I'm on a boat in the middle of a still pond, and the boat never rocks, and it's beautiful, but it's not enough. I want the boat to rock, but I don't want the boat to capsize. And I want some oars just to make sure I'm okay. So pause this for a moment and write down any metaphors and ideas you may have based on what I've just told you. Okay, so here's an overview of the story that I told to this client in response to what they said. And if you ever watch the client session video, you'll see the immediate, profound impact that this story had on them. The story is about a young Buddhist monk who embarks on a transformative journey that explores the nature of growth, patience, kindness, wisdom, and self-discovery. The monk starts by planting a seed in a serene garden and commits to giving it the space and time to grow. He contrasts this with a tale of a child who digs up his planted seed every day to check on its growth, thereby obviously stunting its growth. The monk decides to let nature take its course. Over time, the monk observes the plant growing into a tall tree. Birds come and nest in the tree, demonstrating the interconnectedness of all life. Reaching an age of maturity, the monk is propelled to go on a journey. He follows a river, meeting several people along the way who need his assistance. In return for his help, he receives gifts that aid him on his journey. As he climbs a mountain, he stumbles upon a cave where he experiences a mystical moment, feeling the presence of a wise entity that reinforces his purpose and role in the world. The climax of his journey occurs when he reaches the summit and discovers a book. Initially, he's disappointed with the book, but he eventually understands the wisdom when he reaches the last page of that book. His journey doesn't end there. With that newfound wisdom, he then returns back to society, ready to impart his knowledge and kindness, affecting people who will in turn touch the lives of others. So, how do I present my therapeutic stories during a therapy session? Well, in my therapy sessions, I'll usually have an information gathering stage, followed by any education, which may be helpful, like teaching a relaxation technique or educating about something. Then discussing their ideal future. What is it that they'll be doing differently in the future, which may identify more areas that they need support or education. Then I'll guide them through any therapeutic techniques if needed. And I'll always obviously clear up anything if they have, say, unrealistic expectations. And stories are often peppered throughout the entire session. But then towards the end of the session, I'll often have a specific eyes closed section where they get to mentally rehearse doing things differently in the future. And while their eyes are still closed, I'll transition into telling the story. At the end of the story, I'll usually say that they can take as long as they like to come back to the room over the next minute or so. And once they open their eyes, we discuss what the next steps are. I check to make sure that they're fully alert by the end of the session and that they're safe and ready to travel home. And I set any tasks for them to carry out between this session and the next session. For telling the actual story, I usually create a story in the form of a journey, working through the metaphors and ideas that I want to present to address what the client wants to achieve. I make sure to use a lot of sensory specific details to help to absorb and focus attention. I frequently use transitions. This helps to deepen the experience, as well as to compartmentalize presented therapeutic work. So if that was wakeful awareness, then you drop down to some therapeutic work here, you do that therapeutic work, maybe you drop down to do some more therapeutic work, you do that work, and then you come back up until you get to the wakeful awareness again, and it kind of compartmentalizes that section off. So I may present metaphors around motivation while discussing walking through a garden. And then we pass through a secret gate that leads to a staircase. I might do a staircase induction leading down to an underground chamber. In that chamber, perhaps I present a therapeutic metaphor about confidence and taking opportunities or believing in yourself. Maybe they do some mental rehearsal there and then transitioning to something else. And so I'm compartmentalizing all these bits of therapeutic work. This can also encourage amnesia for the elements of work, as clients can often forget or be hazy on what took place in specific locations or aspects of the story. They're more likely to remember that surface level than they are those deeper areas. And then I normally conclude it roughly where I started. And I'll weave in conversational hypnotic language patterns and techniques, like using vague language, embedded suggestions and ideas, binds and linking suggestions. I may use an embedded suggestion like, and they become absorbed in the experience of gazing up at the sky, noticing the different animals forming from the passing clouds. Or I might be guiding the listener through a first-person story and use linking suggestions like, And as you rest back into the chair, so you can find yourself drifting deeper into the experience. Or a double bind, like, and I don't know whether you become deeper absorbed with the sound of the stream bubbling alongside you, or with the way the clouds move overhead. I'll often change tenses, perhaps telling a story about a character, but then at a crucial moment I may refer to the client, saying you, like they rested back in the meadow gazing up at the stars as you relax deeply and comfortably into this experience. Or if I'm telling a third person story, I'll often use character dialogue to talk directly to the client, saying something like, and the wizard said, as you sit there listening to me, you can begin to make those deep and meaningful changes. And I think it's important to try not to mismatch clients. This is where vague language is really helpful. If I talk about being on a beach, if I haven't specified the type of beach beforehand, then I don't know what beach the client is in and on in their mind. So I'll use vague language while drawing the client's attention to aspects of the inner experience, like saying, and I wonder what the sky looks like. So I'm encouraging them to notice and to focus their attention, but not something like, and you can notice the blue sky. If I want something in someone's experience, for example, say I wanted to have them encounter a stream, then I'll introduce this in advance. I won't just say, and you find yourself at a stream. I'll say something like, and I wonder when you'll discover that stream. So I'm implying the stream is in their experience, they just haven't found it yet. I closely observe the client and I adjust what I'm doing based on my observations of how they're responding to me. Sometimes I may integrate a task at the end of the session that's based on one of the metaphors or the story that I've told. So before I wrap this up, I just want to guide you through a therapeutic storytelling experience using everything I've been telling you. Something I often do when teaching is I say to the group, one of you has something that you wanted to talk to me about, but you haven't had a chance. I've been giving some thought to a metaphor that would be just right for you, and I just wanted to take a moment to share it with you. Everyone else can just engage and enjoy this experience, and may also find that they get something positively therapeutic from this, but you can get the full benefit. I then tell the group a story with therapeutic metaphors and invariably get contacted over the coming weeks following that situation from people telling me about how they wanted to ask me something but were too nervous or they didn't get a chance, and that they're so happy that I picked up on it and I created the therapeutic metaphor for them, that it's been really helpful for them. So this story is related to you all being here, learning this, listening along to me. So just take a moment, if it's safe for you to do so and your attention isn't required anywhere else, to get comfortable and just allow your eyes to close for a minute. That's it. And as you begin to comfortably relax, I don't know whether you'll relax deeper to the sound of my voice or whether it'll be to the spaces between my words. And as you drift comfortably into this experience, I'm just going to tell you a story where you find yourself relaxing in a meadow one evening, navigating through the landscape, using the constellations overhead. As the sky continues to get darker and the air comfortably cooler, you watch the way the constellations move, recognizing their patterns, Orion striding so gracefully across the night sky, the smudge of colour just beneath Orion's belt, standing out more against the inky blackness as your eyes continue to adjust to the dark. The sensation of the cool air against your cheeks, the soft, dull sound of each measured footstep through this landscape. And gradually, in the distance, you can notice the gentle glow in the windows of a small cabin. And you walk towards that cabin, ascend a couple of steps to the front door, and knock. And after a short pause, an elderly lady with frizzy silver hair and the kindest of smiles answers. "Welcome, traveller." She invites you in, and behind her you can see an incomplete jigsaw. "Would you like a cup of tea?" the woman asks before gesturing for you to sit in a comfortable seat by a crackling fire. You rest back into the seat, feeling the warmth from the fire on your cheeks, listening to the occasional popping from the fire, almost being mesmerized by the flickering of the orange glow illuminating the room. The woman brings over the tea and begins to talk with you. She asks where you're headed. You explain that you received a note telling you to visit a location where you would find an old temple. You are told that within the temple you'll gain deep knowledge and wisdom. You felt compelled to investigate. The woman stands and beckons to you to join her by the jigsaw. While she's searching for a specific piece, she talks gently, almost hypnotically, in the background. You know, jigsaws come broken and jumbled up. You know something's there. You have an idea of what it should look like. You just don't know how all of the pieces fit together. At first, it can be frustrating. Before you open the box, you don't know what you don't know. Then, when you open the box, suddenly you see all of the jumbled up pieces. It can look so overwhelming. Suddenly, you're aware of the daunting task you've set yourself. You start to look for patterns and connections between pieces. I start by working on the edges and the borders first, as I can connect the familiarity of an edge as being something I already know. Everything within the border I don't know. As you absorb yourself in the jigsaw, you begin to better recognize patterns in the pieces and in which bits fit with which other bits. After a while, this awareness leads to developing a system for the jigsaw. Perhaps you realize that now you have some of the pieces in place and can better see the bigger picture and how things are fitting together. You begin to organize pieces by color or separate out pieces which have a clear element of the image on them, almost like islands in the middle of the jigsaw. And suddenly, you know what you're doing, and the jigsaw becomes easier to complete. As the woman finishes saying this, she places the last piece in place, taps the jigsaw in that location of the last piece, looks up at you and smiles before heading back to the seats by the fire. You ask the woman about this place, this cabin seemingly in the middle of nowhere. The woman shares how she came out to this remote location to find herself. She built this cabin herself, planning what she wanted the cabin to look like, mapping out where the foundations would be before building sturdy foundations for her cabin, and then building this cabin up from those foundations. She then mapped out the garden, planted seeds, watered them and nurtured them, giving them a comfortable bed to grow in, and watched as the plants in the garden grew, bringing with them birds, bees and butterflies, and the sweetest fragrances. She spoke of people bringing her gifts as housewarming presents, which she adorned her cabin with, each item containing meaning, a connection, and a story to tell. The woman offers you a place to stay for the night. As you settle down into the most comfortable bed, you drift into a pleasant dream about building bridges between islands, connecting those islands before jumping in the air and discovering yourself transforming into an owl, flying silently and gracefully over those islands, gaining a new perspective on the landscape below, seeing the connections and expanding your wisdom, before seeing that cabin, flying down to the cabin, and awakening the next morning, feeling so deeply refreshed and revitalized. The woman bids you farewell as you continue on your journey to that old temple. And after 2 more days and nights, you finally arrive at the location of that old temple. You explore the ruins and find a way into the temple, descending into those ruins, noticing the stillness and slight mustiness of the air inside, torchlight glistening off the moss on the walls. You find a stone door and notice a lever on the wall. You pull down on that lever, and with the sound of sliding stone, the door opens to reveal a vast chamber. And in the middle of the chamber is a plinth, and on that plinth is a book which looks hundreds of years old. Around the walls appear to be stories told, illuminating knowledge and ancient wisdom. You approach the book, open that book, and notice that on each page is just a mirror. You turn through all of the pages from front to back, and then from back to front. You feel a sense of confusion mixed with curiosity until eventually, like a flash of light, you have an aha moment. Suddenly, with a smile, you understand and you know you can leave this place. You make the long journey home, where you share your tale with friends and family, sharing what you learned from your experience here, your insights and changes, understandings, and how it will change the way you think about and do things differently in the future. Finally, being home, you feel that relief of settling down and resting, as you, here now, can reorient comfortably back to the room and open your eyes. So, at the heart of storytelling is connection. A connection between storyteller and listener, between therapist and client, between a person and ideas. If you can package therapy within a story, you can make it more impactful. You can bypass yes buts that a client may give. You can present ideas someone may not normally even consider. A story can be as detailed and personal as I've described here today, finding metaphors from the client, weaving these together into something meaningful to them. Or it can be as simple as telling a story or giving an example. Whether it's saying, I saw a client the other day who was in a similar position, and then sharing something that was helpful to that other client to help stimulate the thinking and ideas for this client. Or telling a story that helps to convey the point you want them to leave with. Like, if I wanted you to leave the end of this video with the idea of storytelling and finding and creating connections by using observations and your clinical knowledge to be helpful, getting results for your clients, I may tell a story about this teddy bear. I said that my sister gave me this teddy bear. She only gave it to me in 2021. When my dad was on his deathbed back in 2014, he told me that I had a sister. He told me that she had tracked him down. He said that he told her that he wasn't her dad. The man who raised her was, and he sent her away. He didn't tell me when this happened. I asked my dad for more information, but he said he wasn't interested and so never shared any more details. For the next 7 years, I tried to find out more information. I was told a name by one person and that they think that she would be older than me. I was told a different name by another person and that they think that she's younger than me. I was told that she lived near my dad on the south coast of England, and I was also told that she lived near Wales. I tried to find her via Facebook, posting to groups in the areas that she was thought to have lived, giving the very good description of female, possibly 30s, maybe 50s, maybe this name or this name. And unsurprisingly, none of this worked. Eventually, I managed to track her down, and within a couple of days of doing so, we met, and we've stayed in touch ever since. It was after we met that she gave me this teddy bear, which says on its stomach, "To my little brother Dan, thank you for finding me." When using storytelling with clients, you want to connect with them. Pay close attention to what they communicate. Notice their patterns and use their metaphors to present truly meaningful therapy for them. If you have any questions, feel free to share them in the comments. Thanks for watching.